What day is this? I don't even know. Oh, it's 10. I should know that. Hello, welcome to the Wild Review. I'm the Wild Reviewer, and welcome to day 10 of 12 Wild Christmas Review Days. Should I say it? No, I'm not going to say it this time. We're almost there! Today's episode, I'm actually going to be breaking that rule in terms of the sequels, because the special we're talking about today is actually a special I've already talked about. If the title couldn't make it very clear, we're talking about Frosty the Snowman today. When I originally talked about Frosty, I just talked about Frosty the Snowman. Just the Frosty the Snowman TV special, the original one from the 60s. I did not talk about its sequels because at the time I didn't have access to watching the sequels, nor did I have enough time to talk about the sequels. I believe Frosty was day 20 or 21, and there were so many other TV specials and films that I wanted to touch upon. We only had about 5-ish days left until the series was over, so obviously some had to be put to the side. But that changes today. That changes all today, because I'm going to talk about all the Frosty the Snowman sequels, except for one, because I'm not sure if it's a Frosty the Snowman sequel on its own. So this one's going to be a little different. It's not going to be formatted like I've been doing these episodes. Instead of saying all the specials summaries at the very beginning, which is what I was thinking of doing, I think it would make more sense if I just did them one at a time so we don't get too confused. I've already talked about the Frosty the Snowman special, so I'm not going to re-talk about that. Instead, I'm going to talk about Frosty's Winter Wonderland, Frosty Returns, and The Legend of Frosty the Snowman. The sequel I will not be talking about is Rudolph and Frosty's Christmas in July. I could have watched it, I could have talked about it, I have plenty of time, it's only the middle of September. The thing is though, I know that film is more of a Infinity War within the Rankin Bass universe, if that makes sense. I know a lot of Rankin Bass Christmas characters are in that story. It merges a bunch of Christmas stories Rankin Bass has done together. If I have to be very honest, I haven't seen every Rankin Bass Christmas story. Even if they play no role whatsoever, I'm not quite sure if I should have watched it and reviewed it, part of the series. I'm not entirely sure, but I do know also that I did not do a lot of research about the film prior to this series, so I don't want to get anything wrong. And also, I don't know if it would fit as a Frosty the Snowman sequel on its own. It probably does. Maybe one day I'll see it. For now, though, we're just going to stick to the animated stuff, like the pure 2D animated stuff that solely focuses on Frosty. And all of them are completely different. So let's just start with the first one. Let's start with the second Frosty the Snowman film. This is Frosty's Winter Wonderland. Released in 1976, Frosty's Winter Wonderland is a TV special where the kids notice that Frosty is starting to become very lonely. So, to give him somebody he can be around all the time, they build him a wife named Crystal. At the same time, Jack Frost is seen as the antagonist in this story, and I think he tries to get rid of Frosty. Like, he doesn't like that the attention is just given to Frosty, so he tries to get the attention back as the winter icon, and he takes Frosty's hat away. I think that's what this was. I think that was his purpose. This was my first time ever watching the special, and I thought it was cute. Like, it felt like a proper sequel. It felt like a typical thing that you would do in a sequel story. It looked pretty great. For the time that it came out, it looked really great. And it was just very warm, ironically. Like, the story was very heartwarming. It didn't feel like Christmas, which is a recurring thing about these Frosty sequels. Not to jump ahead of myself, but this special, I don't think mentions Christmas. It mentions the North Pole. The North Pole is mentioned a lot, but in terms of Christmas, it does not relate to the story whatsoever. In fact, I actually think this takes place after Christmas, It definitely takes place in winter, but these are seen more as winter stories, aside from Christmas stories. So I don't know how some people would feel on that. They kind of took the Christmas element out of Frosty the Snowman, but it's still a cute little story. Jack Frost was a pretty interesting antagonist. I like his character. I like the Jack Frost character. I know he has his own Rankin Bass story, so maybe I should check that out. Is he also in the Christmas in July story? Jack Frost is much like the magician, where he was once an enemy, but now they are friends. At the end of the film, he does become the best man at Frosty's wedding. Why don't we talk about his wife now? I thought the element of giving him a wife was cute. Again, it felt like something that fits a sequel story. Adding in a new character always is something that I guess always happens in a sequel. And it's very fitting that they built him a wife. The way that magic happens with these snowmen is weird. Like, it made sense with Frosty and the magic hat to be on his head, and that's how he comes to life, but there were 2 snowmen that were made in this sequel, and the way they came to life was just strange. Crystal, she was given something to hold, and she was brought to life, and then the snowman that married the 2 of them, he was given a book. I guess if you just build a snowman and say that they're supposed to be something, and then give them whatever they are supposed to be. Like if you make a snowman construction worker and you put a helmet on him, I guess he'll just come to life and build you a house. The last thing I have to say about Frosty's Winter Wonderland is I almost thought they were gonna introduce a new plot, which would have seemed really interesting, but then I noticed we only had about 3 minutes left. It was weird. There was a line that talked about how, you know, we wish it could be winter all the time, and I think it was Jack Frost that was like, oh, I can make that happen, and maybe it was in spring? Maybe? Was the scene in spring? Whatever the case is, the end of the special, there was a discussion on let's have it be winter all the time, and then there was a quick little lesson of we can't have that happen because the trees won't be able to bloom and all the other seasons need to come around. That would be a really interesting story if you think about it, where it's just winter all the time. Like, that'd be a really interesting holiday/winter story to tell. Well, that's Frosty's Winter Wonderland. Was it better than Frosty the Snowman? It was cute, but I don't think anything will top the original story, so I think it stands at number 2. In fact, I think all the rankings of these Frosty stories, they could be ranked in the order of when they were released. Except the 4th one. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's talk about the 3rd one now, Frosty Returns. This special, which was released in 1992, focuses on Frosty the Snowman returning, and he returns. I guess he's trying to help a town learn about winter? So, Frosty is just in this town where everybody hates winter. And even the kids, some of the kids hate winter. There's a scene with all the kids chanting, "No more snow, we don't want any more snow, no more! No more snow!" And a little girl named Holly, she's the only one who's excited for winter. The town has this company which makes this sprayable can. It's called Summer Wheeze. You spray the snow and it just magically goes away. And this company is hoping to make so much that winter never comes back. Like, they want to obliterate the winter season. Everybody wants winter to go away. And that's the plot. That's what happens. That's what I sat down to watch. I remember, oddly enough, I actually saw this Frosty film when I was little, but I didn't know it was a Frosty sequel, so I always thought it was the original Frosty the Snowman story. And then when I saw the original Frosty the Snowman story years later, I was confused as to why that scene wasn't in there. So I always thought that I just made that scene up. And then when I found Frosty Returns a few years ago, I was like, oh, I'm not crazy. I actually saw that special. John Goodman is Frosty in this story, so that's interesting, and he sings too. I've never... This is the second story that I've talked about in this series that focuses on John Goodman. That's a bit interesting. It's a coincidence? Probably not. So this is worth noting. I don't know if this one is accurate though, but I feel like this special was animated by the same people that have made various different Peanut specials, the Charlie Brown TV specials. I can't confirm that. I haven't done that much research on it. Maybe while I'm putting this together, maybe I could put a confirmation of who the animation studio was behind this. And if they did Charlie Brown specials, cool. What I can confirm though is the people that made the music are the same people that made music and background noises for Rugrats and Rocket Power and essentially any Klaski-Skapoo production. It's the same music. If you heard it, you'll know what I'm talking about. There's a specific type of music that these shows do. I noticed that instantly. Story was cute. That's all I gotta say. I mean, nothing really stuck out. I like the idea that Frosty goes from town to town now. Like, we're also going to see this in the final story, which we're going to talk about in a minute, but I like the idea that he's just a character that goes from one town to another helping people, and I guess he helped this town learn that winter is cool. There's a cat in this special. There's an evil cat. So that's Frosty Returns. It wasn't horrible. I'm just trying to figure out whether or not I liked it or not. It was okay. It was cute. It was fine. It was a TV special. I mean, everybody's minds just completely changes once they see a talking snowman. With that said, let's move on to our final Frosty the Snowman story, The Legend of Frosty the Snowman, which this time is an actual film. Released in 2005, this direct-to-video film focuses on the town of Evergreen, where the mayor, Mr. Tinkerton, institutes strict rules and structure for all the residents, his family, and all the children. When Frosty the Snowman blows through the town, he proves to them what having fun and being yourself is all about. Though all these fun antics rub off on all the kids and are seen as rebellious actions by the adults. Okay, I'm going in blind here, so I gotta bring over the laptop. Yeah, I got rid of the pad. Remember I had a pad? I got rid of it. I have technology now. So I definitely went in blind with this particular film because even though I did not see Winter Wonderland as a child, I was definitely aware of it. Frosty Returns I had seen previously, like I stated, and I did also see it just a few years ago. The Legend of Frosty the Snowman, though, I have never seen. I've never seen a trailer for it. I did not know it was a real thing. I also didn't know that it wasn't a 30-minute special. I was going into this thinking, oh, I'm just going to be here for a few minutes. This is an hour-long film, so I went in blind with this story. Here's something I noticed, however, when it came to this film. Almost every actor, and I say almost because I believe there's one or two that don't apply to this fact, but almost every voice actor in this film has worked on a Nickelodeon property. You can say that for any voice actors, but I think it's just really interesting that a vast majority of this whole entire cast is made up of Nickelodeon voice actors. Bill Fagerbakke, who voices Patrick in SpongeBob, plays Frosty the Snowman, which is really interesting because I've never heard this man's voice in anything else other than SpongeBob. And Frosty is not super dim-witted in this film. He is very goofy, so there are times where it does sound like he's just playing Patrick, but it's just really interesting to hear him do a different voice Kind of feels like the earlier SpongeBob episodes, if I have to be honest. Like, that's how the voice sounds. And then Tom Kenny plays Mr. Tinkerton. How interesting is that? But that's not where it stops. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names, but Kath Soucie plays Phil and Lil on Rugrats. Janine Elize, she played Carl on As Told by Ginger, and was also in Cat Dog and Rocket Power. Kenny Blank was in As Told by Ginger and All Grown Up. He had a few small roles. Tara Strong, I mean, we know who Tara Strong is. Gray DeLeslie was in My Life as a Teenage Robot. She was Sam in Danny Phantom, and she's various characters in The Loud House. Candy Milo is Nick from Jimmy Neutron, and Tresh McNeil was Charlotte Pickles in Rugrats, and Arnold's grandma in Hey Arnold. I just find that interesting that a vast majority of Nickelodeon voices are in this film, which has nothing to do with Nickelodeon. It's not even a Nickelodeon property. So what did I think about the film? I gotta be honest, I don't care what reviews say about this film. I really enjoyed it. And that's why I put this above Frosty Returns. That's my ranking. It's Frosty the Snowman, Frosty's Winter Wonderland, The Legend of Frosty the Snowman, and Frosty Returns. In fact, arguably, I can even go as far and say that this is much higher than Frosty's Winter Wonderland, because that was alright. For the time that this came out in, the animation is not horrible. It could be worse, but for early 2000s, the animation isn't that bad, and the story is enjoyable. Like, it had me laughing a few times, but there really weren't any parts that made me shake my head or cringe or just feel like that, why was that in the story? This felt like a story I could see being made in the early 2000s aimed for children. And it's not that bad of a story. One thing that I think is really fascinating is that this has a connection to the original Frosty the Snowman. And it could also be argued as being one of the very first stories that focuses on children when they grow up and now having to deal with life on their own. In other words, what TV is doing now with television shows, how they're bringing back old shows. Let's use iCarly for an example. In iCarly, they were teenagers in the original show. Now they're in their 20s, so now we're focusing on that. Frosty the Snowman is kind of doing that in this film. This film does focus on a legend of Frosty the Snowman. And one of the main characters, one of the main kids, Tommy, he's the son to Mr. Tinkerton. He finds a comic book about Frosty the Snowman, and it's a magic comic book. And the kids in the comic are the same kids that were in the Rankin Bass special. And it's revealed that the kid in the blue sweater in the original special is Mr. Tinkerton in this film. That's pretty cool. Of course, there is kind of a continuity error. The magician is in this film, but they make it to where the magician was Mr. Tinkerton's dad, which is not accurate in the Frosty special whatsoever. But that's a minor nitpick I have of the film. There are a lot of things in this film that kind of foreshadow what's going to happen, like little reveals in this film that I definitely saw coming. Spoiler area if you do not want to be spoiled, even though I just kind of said a spoiler a few minutes ago. I'll give you a second. Okay, the narrator in this film is Tommy All Grown Up, and he ends up marrying Sarah, who's one of the girls in this film. And we see at the end there's a little connection with the two of them. Tommy's in love. Tommy is feeling the love at a very young age. I also saw Tommy's dad having something to do with Frosty coming way before the reveal, just on the way that Mr. Tinkerton was acting. But overall, I really did enjoy this film. There were a lot of moments that I did find genuinely very funny. There's one point where Mr. Tinkerton, he has a clipboard and he's expecting things to go as planned. Like he schedules out the day for everybody in town and keeps things in order. And he gets up, it's 6 o'clock, and he notices the sun isn't out. He's yelling at the sun for being late. I found that pretty funny. Frosty the Snowman is not the main character in the film, but he plays a really big role to be very important in this film. If you've never seen The Legend of Frosty the Snowman, I definitely would recommend it. Definitely check it out. It can be a classic of its own. Unfortunately, it wasn't received very well. There are probably people out there that really enjoy the film, but it didn't do super well. Some people even claim that it's worse than Frosty Returns. Of course, nothing's gonna beat the original source material, but this one is a really enjoyable film. And it's really interesting because being that this is a direct-to-video film, those don't really do super well. Usually if it's a direct-to-video film, then that means it wasn't necessarily good enough to be in theaters or maybe even on TV, and they look cheesy, and you know, I haven't seen the trailer yet for this particular film. I still haven't seen the trailer for it despite seeing the film. I may give it a watch right after I do this, but it probably gives off a very cheesy story element, and it's not a cheesy story whatsoever. It's an enjoyable film. I could definitely see a group of kids enjoying it, maybe not adults, but it's a very enjoyable film. I had a fun time watching it. I didn't want to look away. It's not a Christmas film. I mean, you can watch it at Christmas time. It's Frosty the Snowman, but there is no mentioning of Christmas whatsoever. In fact, I don't even think Christmas is taking place around this time. I want to say maybe it's just winter. But that's all I have to say on that topic. That's it with the Frosty films. I've said everything I need to say. Overall, they weren't bad. I mean, even Frosty Returns, it wasn't horrible. I'm just confused. I know a lot of people will probably say the original Frosty is the best. I mean, I've kind of hinted at that. But if you haven't seen these sequels, definitely give it a try. You can't really give an opinion on something if you've never fully seen it. Something that I have learned along the way of doing all these videos. And I would definitely give them a watch. Give them a chance. You may actually enjoy it. Maybe you will enjoy Legend of Frosty the Snowman just like I did. But what do I know? You could have a completely different opinion. If you saw any of these sequels, let me know what you thought about them in the comments below. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. If you've never seen them, what do you think of what I had to say here? Does this convince you enough that maybe you should give them a check out? Do you want to watch it after watching me talk about it? Alright, I don't need you anymore. You can go over here. We're done for that. We're done for the day. We've only got 2 more days left. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve. Wow, this felt really fast, and that's because it was. It was a short series. It wasn't 25 days. It's Christmas Eve, which means tradition time. I have a list of my traditions, and one of those traditions includes watching Elf, something I do every year on Christmas Eve. But did you know that there is another Elf film? I bet some of you knew that. Some of you maybe didn't know that. Want to know what it's about? Well, that's where I come in. Come back tomorrow, because I'm going to be talking about the not necessarily a sequel to Elf, more of a remake, but a unique remake of the Elf story that people could be on the fence about. I know some people like it, I know some people don't like it. It's the same thing with these Frosty films, but that's what I'm talking about tomorrow, so come back tomorrow for day 11, Christmas Eve, and you will hear me talk about this interesting Elf sequel story. It's not a sequel. For now, though, that brings us to the end of day 10 of 12 Wild Christmas Review Days. Thanks for watching The Wild Review. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing.